Introductions. My name is Chris Csilker. My team is the Advantage Inn team. I work out of an office space that my wife and I own in Okemos, KW Okemos. There are two KW Okomeses, the other one is Deb Federal. Nobody knows her yet. As of right now, I am a one-man team with a lot of support. So I have a marketing team of 3 individuals. So one is the director of marketing who supervises 2 to 3 student employees at any given time. And then I have a virtual assistant through Cyberbacker. Her name is Jaja. She's in the Philippines and she manages some administrative tasks, but is primarily concerned with transaction coordination. So she works my under contract through close. We don't, in this company, this market center, take money physically from our clients, so that does not really apply. It might behoove you to mention that so that it doesn't create confusion later. Like you client are never going to be physically handing me money. It's going to be paid through the closing proceeds, handled by the title company, your earnest money deposit when we get to a purchase agreement. Please use our Nest and just get it done electronically. Please don't take checks. It used to be that we would take physical checks from clients and deposit them on their behalf with the title company. There's so much risk in that, and there's no reason for it. You lose that check and somebody figures out a way to cash it, you're hosed. Just use our Nest, prep your buyer. It's going to be a $20 fee to deposit the earnest money deposit in the most secure way possible direct to the title company. Okay. Part G, confidentiality. That's really the only word you need to know. Confidentiality. What are you allowed to share about your client? Nothing without permission. Yep. About the only thing is what they're willing to offer for a particular property. And that will be offered through your purchase agreement. Nothing else needs to be divulged. Their names will be on it. I think there's an opportunity that in the future that might not even be the case. We'll see.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
That there's an opportunity that I think in the future we might not even be putting buyer names on purchase agreements because it could potentially lead to fair housing violations. We'll see. We're going to skip seller's agent since that's not relevant to today's course and take a look at buyer's agent. We don't really have sub-agency, so don't worry about that part too much. If you have anybody ask you about sub-agency, just go, wow, you're really versed in real estate. That's an excellent question. I want to make sure I answer that appropriately. Let me get back to you on that. But I've been doing this 11 years. Nobody's ever asked me about sub-agents to the buyer or sub-agents to the seller. So don't worry about that. The big thing is my job as a fiduciary representative of you, my client, is to help you find the right house, get it for the best price we are capable of getting it. That does not mean below the asking price. Get it in a time frame that works best to you to the best of my ability. Inform you of everything that I know about home and refer you to professionals to make sure that you've gotten your due diligence and understand everything that you can about what you're buying. Facilitate a clean and handle closing in the best way possible for you. Transaction coordinator is on the top of page 2 of this document. Have one, don't be one. A transaction coordinator is someone who does not have a legal fiduciary responsibility to either party of a transaction. If a friend, family member, someone in your sphere comes to you and says, hey, I'm trying to sell my house or I'm trying to buy a house, and somebody I know has got one and they're gonna do it, can you just help us get it closed? You can absolutely do that. Get some help first, because that is a little bit trickier. There are a few more transparency items you need to be very cognizant of as you go through that process to make sure that A, both parties have a great transaction, and B, you don't get yourself in a pile of money. Okay. And again, a little confusing because you can be a transaction coordinator but you can also have a transaction coordinator that just handles the paperwork and the communication of your transaction from under contract through close.
And you charge usually a fee to the client, right?
I do. Not every agent does. That is completely each agent's business decision, as is your commission. That's a business model. If you want to talk about business models, we can get into that at the end if we have time. Designated agency. Who here knows what designated agency means and why it's important? Anybody? You know what it means.
You know I meant it.
Go for it.
Well, I was going to, you're the problem.
No, tell me.
Well, designated agency is when the office, has each agent has their own responsibility and to not share any information about their client, buyer, seller to the other agents so that they could use it against them, so you have a relationship. The only other person that would have the information that you have would be your broker.
And even your broker shouldn't have that information unless there's a problem with the file.
Yeah, and everybody, the ones that are not designated offices, everyone in the office basically there works for the buyer and seller, is that correct?
Correct. So there is a difference between office relationships and teams. Is anybody here going to be joining a team?
I haven't in the past.
Okay, already on a team. So, if you are representing a buyer and the listing is within your team, this might not apply. Talk to your TL before you enter into a purchase agreement for that property with your client, because that will change things a little bit. At that point, your team leader might become a dual agent and you might need to use some different forms.
Okay.
Does that make sense? If you're within the office, the important thing to note is real estate used to be practiced in the buyer agency didn't exist. I mean, even if we had no knowledge of who the seller was or what the property was, if we brought a buyer, we were working for the seller was paying us to bring that buyer. But we could not really legally negotiate different terms or advocate for our client effectively. That did change, thankfully. We now do have exclusive buyer agency. Designated agency means 2 agents within this office can each represent their client independently as a fiduciary, and then Kim Dunham, our principal broker, becomes the dual agent. She should have no knowledge of this transaction unless there's a problem. If there's a problem, she might remove herself and request some new forms, but that's a bridge you cross when you get to it. It's very rare. Okay. Affiliated licensee disclosure. Please make sure that you're checking both buyer agent and the top check here acting as a designated agent, because you are. You would then sign under the licensee section. Pro tip under acknowledgement.
What
Don't-
form are you on, I'm so sorry?
We're on page 2 of the disclosure regarding real estate agency relationships. At the very bottom under acknowledgement. Pro tip, if you have more than one buyer, i.e. a husband, wife, or 2 partners buying the property together, put them on one line and check that line buyer instead of having 2 lines for each buyer. Because then you have a form that you can take to maybe an unrepresented seller, i.e. a for sale by owner, and say, look, I have an agency relationship, and they can sign this form already with your buyer signatures on it. And that covers you for disclosure of agency relationships. Because you can say, I'm helping my buyers buy a home, please sign this form before we enter into negotiations, right? That just saves you from having to do another form later. So keep them on the same line. Final note for this, you will see seller's agent with a limited service agreement or buyer's agent with a limited service agreement. Again, I've never had that really come up, but we don't practice limited service agency in this market center. So if someone asks you about that, that might come across as a, hey, can I pay you a reduced commission if I don't want you to find me a home inspector, or I don't want you to send me listings from the MLS. That's limiting the services that you offer for reduced commission. We don't do that. We are a full service agency. So if somebody's asking you that, we're going to get into that with objection handling later, so we'll circle back. And just know we don't practice that. It's all or nothing. Now, you might choose to take less and give them all. That's your choice. But we don't do piecemeal. That is our time for this one. We're slightly over, so we're going to speed up a tiny bit. The next form is the exclusive buyer agency agreement. This is a 3-page form. Within the last 6 months, the biggest change here is this form must be dated, and the dates of your client's signatures must be on or before your showing of any property at which they make an offer. If it's not, you've got a problem and you're opened up to liability individually to a very large conglomeration of attorneys that are very well funded who will come after you if they can. So, get this signed as early in the relationship as you can. Have this signed before you show any home, even if you have to carry it, print it out and carry it with you, and have them sign it on the hood of your car before you open the front door. Okay? Very important. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that anymore. There used to be, well, I'll show them one, or and I'll show them too. Nope, can't do it. This must be signed and dated before you open a door. Okay?
Which makes it so much easier.
Makes it so much easier. It's how it always should have been, and now there's no question. You have to do it.
Can I have a question regarding this matter? Okay, I get an email, I wouldn't show the listing that I had early last week.
If it's your listing.
But I want to, it is, but I want to explain one thing, where it's going, and you can come back to that at one point. But so then I get an email saying that we decided we're not interested in that home, but we want to have you as our agent.
Perfect.
Okay, with that said, can you send us some, is it okay if I send you homes that I see? I said, of course, yes, you can.
Yep.
But now, I shouldn't be sending homes out to them until I get this done?
You can send them homes to look at. You can't open the door to a home and let them in until
Gotcha.
this is signed.
So if you own the house, is it the same as after doing a listing for a client?
100%, because the fiduciary is to you. You can't help a buyer negotiate a better deal for a property you own. So you are a seller and you are acting as if you represent a seller because you do.
Okay, well, this is the current situation
Yep.
I have now. My listing under contract right now.
Yep.
I can show that if someone calls me, because it's my.
Yep. 100%. I would have them sign the disclosure of agency before you show them the house, just to cover yourself.
Just stupid noise.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not an exclusive buyer agency form. That's the disclosure of agency
Right.
relationship saying, I am selling this property for my client or for myself. And then you're handed. And if you're saying I'm selling for myself, make sure you also include I'm the licensed agent in the state of Michigan and in the PA.
This is interesting, it's his house, and he should sign that one, but, now, if they want to buy the house,
Mhm.
then does he have to either become a dual agent? Or-
Absolutely not. You can absolutely sell any property without representation. You should almost never be in a situation where you have to use dual agency.
So, because it's his house,
He is not representing the person choosing to buy it. He is helping them buy it. They are a customer, not a client.
Okay.
And so he is disclosing his interests, such as the seller. He's making that very clear to the buyer. And he's saying, buyer, I will make sure this is an easy and smooth process for you. All you have to tell me is how much to put on this line and sign here, and then I get to decide if I'm going to take it, counter it, or reject it. But he's
Okay.
not representing me.
but, could dual agent, if it wasn't his personal home, could dual agency
No.
become, you're holding an open house, somebody comes through, they wanna buy it?
Dual agency is not a scenario in which that applies. You should not ever use dual agency for that scenario, ever.
Cause I did that once, I mean, a guy ended up backing out.
And you were wrong, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You learn better, you do better.
Yeah, so I had an open house, he came through and he wanted to put in an offer, and I had the seller and him both sign dual agency before I wrote the offer.
That was the wrong way to do it, and that's okay, it worked out. You should have had the buyer sign the agency disclosure stating, representing that you work for the seller, and then they are a client. And your conversation with your seller is potentially maybe you're earning a little bit more for helping an unrepresented buyer, but charging less overall, or their overall costs are better, i.e. their net is better. But you put yourself in an unnecessary sticky situation by entering dual agency in that scenario. They are a customer, not a client. The only time the dual agency should really apply, that has happened in my experience, is I have a listing on the market at $250. I have a separate buyer that has a cap on their search at $200, but they get a raise. Or mom and dad give them a gift, and now that $250 is attainable, and it's the perfect house for them. I've never shown it to them, I've never talked to them about it because it wasn't in their budget, and now it is. And I have shown them homes, I have helped them maybe negotiate with their offers, whatever. I am their agent, but I am also the agent for this listing. And now they are a really good fit for each other. And that could not have been avoided before I had fiduciary relationships with both parties. At that point, I say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, before I show this home, I want to be clear, I do have an agency relationship with this client. At this time, I have told them nothing about your home. I would like permission to show this home. If they are interested, we will discuss what dual agency looks like, but I want to take this one step at a time. Is that okay? They always say yes. So, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I'm going to be very clear again. I represent the seller in this property. Before we enter into a discussion about what dual agency and making an offer for this property looks like, I want to be clear that I have agency relationship with both of you, and that will require a very transparent conversation. Are you okay considering that before I show you the property? I'm not gonna go into what it looks like, because I don't need to weigh everybody down with that. But then they say, yes, I showed them the property, yep, we want it, what's it gonna take to get it?
So, I see where you're going with this, but isn't it better to have something in writing for both sides? Because verbally is one thing, in writing is another.
I've already got agency relationships established with both parties.
Okay?
Everybody knows where I stand.
Okay.
Only until they tell me they wanna make an offer, do I need to go any further. Buyer says, I wanna make an offer, and I say, great, we're gonna stop you right there. Before you ask what's it gonna take, or before I answer what it's gonna take, I wanna be really clear. This now is being put in a dual agency situation. I can't help you negotiate a price without breaking my fiduciary responsibility to the seller. I can't help the seller negotiate a price without breaking the fiduciary responsibility to you. When everybody's special, no one is. So here's how we're gonna do this. I'm gonna ask you to give me one evening to have a conversation with my seller. Where that conversation is going to be, are we comfortable all sitting together at the same table and working out the price? If you're not comfortable with that, or they're not comfortable with that, I'm going to refer you to another agent for independent representation. I'm gonna stick with the property because that's the best way I have to do for my business. But if you're willing to sit together at the table and find a win-win, here's the caveat. My business choice is I will reduce the total commission I take to make this a three-way win. You, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, get the house you want for a price you're willing to pay. Mr. and Mrs. Seller get to sell your house, have a smooth, clean, and easy transaction, and have an increased net. Does everybody agree? I make a little bit more than if I had just sold, I make a little bit less than if I had sold that property to a different buyer, and sold that buyer maybe a different property, but I have an easier transaction. I have two wins, two people that are really happy with me. The only caveat is, the one piece of this transaction we have to work out at the same table is the price. If we can do that, great. If we can't, I'm going to refer you to that. I've never had anyone say no, and those have always been great transactions, and everybody's always very happy. And the way you present it and the verbiage around it is very important because it is a sticky situation. Michigan is only one of 11 states that still allows dual agency representation, and there's a reason for that.
See, by that conversation you're having with both,
Mhm.
how can they not have respect for you?
100%. I'm just being very transparent about the one area that I can't really do my job, and I'm going to reduce the amount I charge because I'm not doing that part of my job. If we can all agree, let's do that. If we can't, that's fine. Let's find something else to make an offer.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to collect a referral on that offer, but it's only going to be 25% or whatever you work out with that agent. But it's still better than nothing, and they still get the house they want, and I still represent my seller very well by getting them a great offer. All right, so diving back into this form. So we kind of got down a rabbit hole, but a very valuable one. Purpose of a buyer agency agreement. I, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, as your agent, my job is to help you find a home where you want to buy a home that meets most of the needs that you're asking for to the best of my ability, negotiate the best price possible for that property, and facilitate a smooth transaction in a time frame that works best for your goals. For that service, I charge a commission of X paid at closing. It is also my prerogative to work to negotiate as much of that to be paid for by the seller as possible. If the seller does not agree to pay that full amount, do you understand and agree that you will be responsible for bringing that difference in cash to closing? I want to prepare you that that's negotiated per contract, per offer, and if that offer negotiation results in a price or a cost to close that's not acceptable to you, you will have every right to walk away before you become entered into a binding agreement. Is that okay? Okay. Tell me about the property you want. This should be very general or very specific, not really in between. By keeping it general, you avoid having to write a lot of these contracts, i.e. a single-family residential home, condominium, vacant lot, or new construction within the state of Michigan. Can't be more general than that, right? Or if you're working with an investor who maybe doesn't want to be locked into a large general contract, you might limit this to a single property or the very specific items with which they're looking for, because they might have agency relationships with other agents. That is not uncommon. And it's whoever brings them the deal gets to close. I have several like that. So just, general or very specific, but not really in between. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it well. You are an exclusive agent. Now, on investors, that can get a little weird. You're just going to have to make some choices about who you work with and why. In most cases, that means if they identify a property that you haven't sent them, i.e. an unrepresented seller for sale by owner, you still have the right to represent them in that transaction, and they do still owe you a commission if they purchase that property. So they need to bring it to you.
What happens if they don't have it? They come to the closing table and they don't have that money? You have that agreement that you just said that they're due at closing, the remaining, whatever, 0.5%, whatever it was.
They can't perform, then you have the right to take them to small claims court.
Okay,
Or, if you choose, you can amend your agreement and take less.
okay.
But they are liable for it, and the contract is binding. It does uphold itself in court. You have to make the business decision of do you want to do that or not.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding that 3%, because that's the part that I'm just trying to get that down in my mind.
And let's
How to
just say
approach
any
that.
percent possible.
But it's 3%.
It's any percent possible.
Yeah, it's not a set
That's-
fee.
It's all negotiable.
It's all negotiable.
It's all negotiable. It's any percent possible. We run into antitrust violations and we say that it is a set percent. So it's whatever percentage you choose to put in that line. Let's say, so you could say, Chris, I choose to put 3% for my business. Now what? What's the next part of your question?
So I choose to charge 3%.
Correct.
Okay. So do you find, and I gotta be careful how I word this with the customer, with the client too, but do you find that if you put 3% into most sellers will pay that, want to pay the 3%? Or what
It
is
is
needed
too early
nowadays?
and there is not enough data to be certain about that.
What are you seeing so far though?
So far, my experience has been that sellers are willing to pay at least a portion or all of that commission,
Especially if the offer is a good offer.
especially if the offer is a good offer. And there are a lot of ways we can negotiate that if we need to. I just want to be clear that you could be charged additional cash to closing if the seller doesn't recover all of that. Are you okay with that? And this might be an opportunity to break out a real quick net sheet of, hey, if you make an offer of $100,000 and the seller covers 0%, you would pay $3,000 to closing. Client's identity. Everything about you is confidential from now until the day that I die. Not until we end the transaction, because that doesn't release you. Everything you know about them is confidential until you no longer exist. Disclosure by client. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, what are you authorizing me to tell people about you in the purchase of a home? What you're willing to pay and how you're paying. That's it. Contact information. I always put care of Keller Williams because I think we're going to be getting to a point on the buyer side where these are recorded with the MLS, just the same as a listing agreement.
So you write in care of Keller Williams?
I just do C/O KW. Indemnification of broker. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I want to be very clear. Should you choose to break, steal, or accidentally cause damage to a property while I am showing it to you, I and my broker are not responsible for you. So please be careful and please lead with integrity. I've never had an issue. If I thought that was going to be a challenge, we wouldn't be sitting here at this table. Time for claims. Should something happen that makes you unhappy, you have 6 months from the time of that event to make a claim with the Greater Lansing Association of Realtors. That could be unhappy with me. That could be unhappy with another agent. That could be unhappy with a scenario of someone who is an affiliate of our association. Just know that you have 6 months from the time that you become unhappy to make that claim. If you are ever in a situation where you feel like you need to do so, I'm happy to help you with the paperwork necessary to make that happen. I've never had that happen to me, and I'm going to work very hard to make sure it doesn't happen in this situation.
Excellent.
Miscellaneous, we do have the right to change or amend. Be very, very careful with changing or amending things that are not blanks for you to fill in, because then you could be acting as an attorney. If your client happens to be an attorney and they ask you to revise or redact, you can choose to do that or not. I would just make sure to have a conversation with Chuck before you enter into a binding agreement, if they amend it. Because they might be hanging you out to dry. Just make sure you're not in a bad situation. Other provisions. What are some things that you would really want to have in there? I personally include TCPA permission. Acceptance of this agreement gives permission to the Advantage Inn team and its representatives to contact you by phone, text, email, and social media.
Say, how do you write this in?
You can type it in, you can handwrite it in, however, but my first provision in these agreements is always acceptance of this agreement gives the Advantage Inn team and its representatives permission to contact you by phone, text, email, and social media.
You write that all
I
out.
write that all in.
I can't write that fast enough, sorry.
That's okay. If you ever find yourself wanting to do it, I'll type it up for you and send it to you.
When you say social media,
Well,
what are you
I'd like to
referring
get that in there.
Any social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. That contact is tagging people, right? Now, I don't know that that's actually covered in TCPA, but I'm gonna damn sure make sure I'm covered. Other provisions besides the TCPA permission that you might have in there, if you choose to charge a closing or compliance fee for your business, maybe to offset the cost of a transaction coordinator or anything else, you would write that in there.
in other provisions?
The
What is it called
purchase-
again?
A closing or a compliance fee, you can call it either one. I call mine a closing fee because they don't pay it unless they close. And it can be an amount that is completely up to you.
So this is the broker fee that's on the
This is-
brokerage fee?
This is a fee directly from the client to the broker. So the way I word it is, the purchaser is to pay a closing fee to Keller Williams Realty at the time of closing for the amount of X. And I make it clear that that is cash to closing. That's not something that we get the seller to cover. That is their fee for my service, in addition to the commission I earn.
And then do you split that with Keller?
Keller Williams does take an agency split out of that. So they lump that in with your commission and they take their split, whatever that is, until you cap. It helps you cap a little bit faster. And any reservations. Reservations is really gonna be more of like a listing side for the most part, but for example, if a buyer already has a home identified and they maybe have a pre-existing relationship with the seller, but they want representation, you might say, this buyer agreement reserves the property at 123 Smith Street from this agreement, which if closed, the buyer agent will receive a commission of X, and it might be different, and you might waive your closing fee, or you might not, but that would be a reservation. Because if they don't close on that property, you still want to have an agreement, right? But if they've already got a relationship, maybe they've even already worked out a price, you might agree to take less to represent them through that transaction. That's a common reservation. Thankfully, the next one is our addendum to exclusive buyer agency. Point of clarification, the exclusive buyer agency agreement hires who to represent the client? That hires Keller Williams. The addendum asks Keller Williams to assign you to be their specific agent. So the addendum is important. The first blank is going to be Keller Williams Realty Lansing East, or just KW Lansing. The second line is the buyer and or buyers. And the date. The date must match the same date that the client enters into the agreement for exclusive buyer agency.
Will you reduce your commission?
Love it. What else?
Do I pay you?
Who pays?
Who pays?
What else?
I just wanna see the house real quick. Can you show it to me?
Just want to see the house. That's a great one for right now. That's a newer one. What else?
People still saying rates? I haven't heard somebody say rates.
That's not particularly related to buyer agency, but it is a
Well,
common
okay,
objection,
yeah,
so
fair
let's
enough.
go over it.
Yeah.
Rates.
I just like to look at them by myself, I don't really wanna sign a contract.
Look at homes myself. I.e., I'll just call the list agent. Okay, what else?
I don't wanna be stuck with one agent. Heard that before.
You've heard that.
Okay, start with one agent, like that. What else? doesn't necessarily apply to anyone in this room, but when I first started, I had two, and that was, why work with someone so young? Because I was 28 when I started,
And you look young now.
and I look young.
Yeah.
If
So
I
you
look
must
young now,
have
I was a
really
baby.
I
looked
see a
young.
little bit of gray, a little bit coming out,
Yeah,
which helps you.
doesn't hurt. I earned every one of them too. Got 3 kids. Why work with someone young? Why work with someone new?
I'm talking with another agent.
Competing?
Yes. Interviewing.
Why should I work with you?
Just in general, why you?
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Teams versus independent agents. There's pros and cons to both, into different presentations. I'm sure your rainmaker, your team leader has said something to the effect of, when you hire me, you're not just hiring one agent, you're hiring a team of experts to support you in the real estate transaction. And if you're competing against someone on a team, you might say, I cover both sides of the market so that I'm not niched to only a buyer or a listing side. That means I know how to look at the whole perspective and negotiate your full offer to make terms that are going to be most likely to be accepted in this competitive market. Right, so two sides of the same coin, just depends on what perspective you want to share with your client. Any other objections that we need to cover? We've got a great list here. Okay, we're going to tackle them one at a time. Commission. Will you work for less? Before we dive into that too much, again, because this is being recorded, I'm going to be very clear here. We're all independent contractors. We do not set any commission. Any commission communication with a client is always negotiable, just so we're all clear. Will you work for less? Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, that is a great question, and honestly, it's one that I receive quite a bit. I want to be very transparent with you. There are costs to running this business that I have in real estate. Those costs include a split to my brokerage, a higher rate of tax paid to both the state and federal government as a self-employed owner, as well as the operating expenses. I have to pay for my office space. I have to pay for my own copies. I have to pay for my own gas, my own car. And those expenses are part of operating this business. Now, I love doing this business, but that also means that I incur costs whether I sell something or not. So I do have to get paid, and I cannot work for free, and I'm sure you respect and appreciate that. I'm curious, since you're asking for me to work for less, what does less look like for you?
Ooh.
Sounds like you've been asked that a couple of times.
We all get asked that.
Okay.
Not every time, but we all get asked that. But before you volunteer a number, know what they're looking for.
Well addressed.
I can't work for free, so let's take that off the table. What does less look like for you? Now, they give you an answer. Follow-up question. Why is that important? Well, because I don't want to spend as much money. I fully respect that. Do you understand that when I represent you, my job is to negotiate with all of my experience and expertise to get you the best deal on a home? The national statistic says that I can negotiate a price 8% better for you than you might be able to negotiate on your own. So if I'm already saving you money through my ability to negotiate and get a property under contract, that might not be for less than the asking price and still the best price possible. Would you agree to pay for that expertise? My rate is X%. Or maybe they might say, well, 3% feels a little high. Would you do it for 2%? Maybe you need to make a choice. Maybe that 2% is worth it. Maybe they're shopping at $1 million homes. You're probably, well, I shouldn't say that. There's an opportunity that you might not get 3% on $1 million home. In our market, that's not a common transaction, but that's a choice. They might say, well, would you do it for 1.5%, i.e. half your commission? And maybe you say, well, it sounds to me like we're having some disagreement around understanding the percentages of the transaction. Would a flat figure be easier or better? It looks to me like you're shopping in the XY price points. A 3% commission would equal this, and I hear that you want to pay less. What if we just set it at a fixed amount? That might be a choice you can make. And that's another way to look at it. We all get to decide. Or maybe it's, if we get the very first home we write an offer on, maybe I'll take X. But after we've looked at or written so many offers, it goes to Y. We can write that into the other provisions. But know what less means before you agree to anything, and then always have another way to push on that just a little bit.
I like to flip it and give them options. You have options. I like
First rule of negotiation is A, be willing to walk away, so I can choose not to work with you. And B, let them give you a number. Usually the first person that spits out a number loses the negotiation.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, who pays? Great one, because this is not truly an objection. This is a clarity question. They don't understand the process. My compensation, in most cases, comes from the seller proceeds. And we are in a new world of real estate since the Sitzer-Burnett settlement, in which that can now be paid in several different ways. It can be paid by you only. That might be a scenario in which that could be advantageous to you, because if you have the financial ability to pay my commission out of pocket, we can take that off of the purchase price of a property, and you'll pay less in interest or less in cash, and potentially have lower property taxes. That could be value. If that's something you'd like to explore, let's talk about that. In most cases, it pays out of seller proceeds. In some cases, it's both parties. The seller agrees to pay some, and you agree to pay some out of pocket. And my ultimate objective is to get you all. I'm willing to negotiate potentially per offer. And we'll explore that as a win as we need to. But I do want you to understand that the commission is negotiated on every offer in addition to this agreement.
So if the seller is willing to pay 3% commission, we can present an offer, a more aggressive offer.
You are never going to know until you make an offer if a seller's going to offer that, unless the agent tells you that verbally.
They're just calling me.
Yeah, they might.
I just think.
I can tell you that I have sensed this decision in my business, and I take all listings now without offering buyer agent compensation because I want to negotiate it on every deal. That's my choice. And I feel like our purchase agreements are going to go in that direction sooner rather than later. But it hasn't gone that way yet.
Okay.
So you take listings.
Yeah, when I take a listing, instead of negotiating buyer agency compensation up front at that listing, I take a listing and say, we are not offering buyer agency compensation. But when I present them their net sheet, I say, here's the scenario in which a buyer agent requests a 3% commission. I have not come across agents asking for more. They certainly can. I just haven't come across it yet. And there's always an option that an agent may choose to take less, or we can negotiate for them to take less. But what really matters is what you're walking away with, so I want you to be prepared for the most likely scenario. So that when I get that offer asking for 3% compensation, it matches my net sheet. Or if it's less, they're pretty happy. So don't confuse a clarity question with an objection. They're not saying they don't want to hire you or work with you. They just want to understand the process. That's really important. And so that kind of comes back to my other point is before you dive into any particular objection or reason not to work with you, make sure it's an objection, not a clarity. And the more questions we can ask, the more expert we appear. I'd like a little bit more information. Why is that important to you? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And did you have a number in mind? Those are all great clarity questions, not objections. An objection is truly, I don't want to hire you. Interesting, it's fascinating that we've sat together for a few minutes here and gone through these documents and working on building what I hope is a trusting relationship. Can you tell me why you don't want to work with me? Maybe it's personal, maybe it's not. Most people aren't that confrontational, but take a breath and ask a question before you dive in. Let's take a look at, I just want to see the house. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I certainly respect that seeing the house is the highest priority to you because you honestly can't know what you want to do or why until you've seen the home. Is that correct? They say yes, it is. Perfect. I certainly respect that. Outside of sending you a link to the MLS listing, if you haven't seen one yet, with all of the interior photos and details that we take data on with our MLS, unfortunately, I'm legally not allowed to open that door for you. Neither is the listing agent without you signing a document. Now, that document the list agent is going to ask you to sign is different than the document I'm going to ask you to sign. The document the list agent will ask you to sign is saying that they work for the seller. That means their job is to get the seller the most money possible for that home. Can you understand why that might not be in your best interest to have them show you the property?
Love it. That's great, dude.
Hey, how accessible is this recording? How fast can we get to it?
It's on YouTube. It'll probably, this one in particular will probably be up next week. And I say that because I have another one that I need to edit first.
Gotcha.
I have a transcript that I'll try and clean up and get to you.
If you would,
Sure.
use it. Thank you.
So the
'Cause I
form
wanna
I'm
go back
going to
and I
ask you
wanna
to
really
sign
listen to
says that
this.
I will work for
Good
you,
stuff.
and my job is to get you the best price for that home and tell you as much about that home as I'm able to with my experience and expertise. Who would you rather have you show you that property? Rates. I just don't think I can afford a home with these interest rates. I can certainly appreciate the difficulty in looking at our current environment. Can you tell me where you're living right now?
123 Main Street.
Perfect. Do you own or rent that property?
I
Or is it
rent
your
it.
parents' home? You rent it?
Yeah.
So the interest rate you're paying right now is 100%. Would you like to reduce that to 6.8?
If that sounds great.
Let's go find you a house.
Okay, sure.
I'm living with my mom and dad. Great. You're paying 0% interest. What's more important to you, staying with mom and dad or paying 6.8%?
Was that a question?
It is.
That sounds 6.8, then beginning to build equity sounds like a better option than living at home.
Perfect. I want to be very clear. Owning a home is not necessarily the best investment you can make, like many agents say, but I do want you to understand that it's the only investment you can make that forces you to save money, helps you build equity without having to order, and comes with a place to sleep, take a shower, and store your stuff. And most importantly, unless you choose, mom and dad don't live there. Let's go find you a house. Ultimately, we can't change the rate. It is what it is. They need to understand that they have to make a choice of staying where they're at right now and what that means, or doing something different.
And they can always refinance if it goes down.
Yep, you can always refinance if it goes down, and let's be clear, that's probably not happening for a long time.
And also, where it is right now is pretty normal.
Yep.
Many people get the,
I have been hearing some conversations that I really like. So, last 2 years, we've all been told, marry the house, date the rate. You can always refinance.
Marry the house, date the rate. That's my bumper sticker.
There you go. It's a great one.
Yes.
And it's now becoming cliche in the real estate world. So think of something a little bit different. You're going to hear marry the house, date the rate a lot. I want you to think of something different. Because I don't want to put you in a situation where you feel like this is going to change in 2 years, and it might not. In fact, that's looking less and less likely. And the fact that it is an average or good rate in the in the history of mortgages probably doesn't mean a lot to you as your first or second home. What I do want you to understand is the rate is the rate. And the benefits of home ownership are much greater than the interest it takes to own a home. What we're going to do is focus on your monthly payment and make sure it's something you can afford. That's what matters.
The rate they have right now, I think, who told us this last week, that these rates are more in line with what it was before COVID. Is that true?
Not really. Pre-COVID, they were still more like 4.5 to 5.
Ah.
So it's still higher than that. In the 50 and even the 100-year average, we're still right there. The 50-year is 6.5, the 100-year is 7.
I'm just gonna say, I sold real estate when it was 18%, and the late eighties, early
Mhm.
nineties, whenever that was,
Yeah.
and when it was 3%. I don't think we'll ever see 18%, I don't think we'll ever see 3%.
Right. And,
So we are right where it's, 5 to 7, it's about the number.
something to remember, the key point here is, if the rate is the key objection, giving them a historical perspective, probably something that make them feel a whole lot better about it. Bring it back to the monthly payment. We're gonna make sure the monthly payment is something you can afford. Let's really evaluate your budget. If you need some help doing that, we can do that together. But let's make sure that this is something that's setting you up for success.
How do you play in the appreciation rate outpacing inflation? Is there a conversation around that?
Most people are not fiscally or financially savvy enough to have that conversation, at least off the bat. And I probably don't wanna dive into that during my counsel.
Okay.
But if they want to get more serious about building wealth, I'd love to set up a meeting to discuss that at a later
And that's something I like.
time. I love that too.
That's-
I do a lot of investment work, and that's something
Yeah.
that's near and dear to my heart. You do have to be a little bit careful to make sure you're not treading the water as a financial advisor.
Yeah, my tagline, building wealth through the power of real estate.
Yeah.
Yeah, just, bam.
Well,
Okay.
just make sure you don't get into guaranteed returns or even projected returns.
Yep.
And you're not charging for financial advice. You're charging for transacting in real estate. I think we've covered look at homes myself, call the list agent. If you want to look at homes yourself, how are you going to get in? You're either going to call a for sale by owner and talk to an owner. What's the owner's goal?
So,
Take the guy who calls for as much money as possible, right? What's the list agent's goal? Get my seller as much money as possible. Are either of those in your best interest? No. So who are you going to call? Call me. Right? I don't want to be stuck with just one agent. Well, unfortunately, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, in this world, since the settlement statement, shopping agents and using more than one agent just doesn't work. Now, if you want to enter into an agreement to look at just one property, I am more than happy to do that. And then I trust that I'll have the ability to earn your trust through that transaction and that experience to enter into a larger agreement thereafter. We can do this one property at a time to start. Your choice to do that or not. But that's certainly a response to that objection. So we can do this for just one house, and I'll prove my value to you in that experience. And we can choose to enter into a general agreement thereafter, or if this is the right home for you, I'll have to help you pursue a purchase agreement, and we don't have to worry about anything else. But you can't have no representation and go look at homes in this way. That's just not legal anywhere in the country. So I respect your wishes, and legally I can't abide.
Someone else threw out there, I'm not gonna lose my license over.
Yep.
over-
This is my livelihood and how I support my
Yeah, and
business.
this
so
is the law.
Yep, this is the law, I'm not gonna play with it. Would you like to be liable for my legal fees? Will I work with someone young or someone new? I put those on the table, so I'm gonna do them really, really quick. Someone young has more energy, fresh insight, and is most up to speed with the market because you are freshly climbing the knowledge hill that is real estate. Same thing for someone new. Real estate has changed enormously just in the last 6 months. Do you want to work with someone that has learned those changes and been a part of those changes, or do you want to work with someone that is fighting those changes and maybe hasn't adapted yet?
I love how you think on your feet, man. You're
I don't
right
think
there.
on my feet. I work through this every day. This is a huge part of my business, is I make sure I know these. I have a real estate coach that drills me on these every week.
See, we wouldn't think that, I don't believe, but that's good.
Competing against other agents. I understand that you are interviewing multiple agents, and I'm going to applaud you for doing your due diligence. That's fantastic. I'm curious, what are you looking for to be comfortable hiring me today? To be your trusted real estate expert. At least let them clarify it.
Yeah.
So they clarify, great, here's how I do those things, or shit, maybe I don't do those things, maybe here's why, or it sounds like, I really appreciate you sharing that perspective and that why that's important to you. It sounds like that's something I really need to work on adding to my business. I will make that my priority as I represent you in finding the home that best fits your needs. Are you ready to work with me to make sure that we can have that happen? Because you've shared that that's important to you, I promise there's nothing more important to me. Let's proceed. If you cannot get them to sign now, get a permission to call them back. So if you want to be bold, I understand you're interviewing multiple agents, and I want to let you know that earning your trust is the most important thing to me, and therefore the right to represent you in finding a home. I believe there is no other agent better qualified because I know you, we've built a relationship, and you're now vitally important to me and my success. We have mutually aligned interests. I would hate for you to end up working with a weaker agent. Are you ready to sign one with me today?
You just ask them. You just ask for the business.
Ask.
Yeah, don't never not ask.
Clarify the objection, answer the objection, ask again.
Are you ready to
Repeat as
sign?
necessary.
Okay.
Other than interviewing other agents, is there something else that you're looking to learn or hear about before you decide to work with me today? Get them all down, clarify. Great. Thank you for sharing with me that you're interested in learning that I'll work for less, interviewing other agents, and understanding your market experience in this neighborhood. I have not sold a home yet, or I have sold a home yet in this neighborhood that you're most interested in. That means I have the ability to go in with fresh, unbiased eyes and negotiate the best deal possible for you. Or I have experience in this neighborhood. No one knows this neighborhood better than I do. My experience is fresh and relevant and will help you get a great home at a great price. Are you ready to work with me today? They say no to everything. Great. When are you meeting with your other agent? Has that been scheduled yet? It's next week. Great. In this market, new homes are being listed every single day. By waiting to interview that other agent, you might be missing the home of your dreams. Do you want to take that opportunity, or are you willing to have that opportunity cost? I can get started for you today. Are there any homes you're interested in seeing right now? I'll see if I can get a sim. But unfortunately, if that's the case, you do need to sign this document.
All right, to stay on schedule. Final
Perfect.
thoughts? Any final thoughts?
That's competing against other agents. Why you? I think we've covered teams versus individual. So why work with you? You've got a great elevator speech, right? I believe you said building wealth through the power of real estate. Obviously, I don't think we'd be meeting together today if building wealth wasn't important to you, just like it's important to me. Is there anything else that's important to you in finding the right agent to help you find a home? Answer that and close. You'll be fine. That's great. What's yours? Why you?
Why me? As Brock puts it, I'm the best. You know, I am the best. My own, I'm the best, you know.
Okay.
Work with me, I'll go for great lengths, you know, to get everything done. You know,
Perfect.
Yeah.
I am a new agent that has freshly climbed with the knowledge hill that is real estate. I am dedicated and prepared to provide you excellent service. In addition to hiring me, you're also getting a team of experts and dedicated service professionals who are going to make sure you have an awesome transaction. Let's get started. What's yours?
Really nothing at this point. I think you're filling all the thoughts I've been thinking, basically.
I have been licensed since 2004, and real estate has always been an interest and passion of mine. I am so excited to be developing this relationship with you as I work on making this my full-time career. What else is important to you?
What else is
Good.
important to you?
In fact, you haven't been as practiced since 2004, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Lean into what you've got. Karen, what's yours?
Do I need to even disclose that to them?
Do you
Not
have
more
to
at all.
disclose that you haven't?
I
In
haven't.
selling, you've had your licenses.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can
You don't have
disclose
to-
that, but I don't have to
No,
disclose
absolutely not.
the other stuff in between.
It's not relevant. There are plenty of agents out there that sell 50 homes a year that are garbage. And there are plenty of agents out there that sell 1 to 2 homes a year that are excellent. Production does not equal quality. It doesn't hurt either, but it doesn't equal it.
You know what, I don't have a smooth one like you. I think it depends on who I'm talking to, and and, what the situation is.
So I'm a real estate agent that prides myself on adapting my presentation to each person individually. Can you tell me what's most important to you in real estate transactions so that I can make sure to exceed your needs?
Can you tell me,
What's important to you in buying or selling a home so that I can make sure to meet and exceed your needs and expectations? I often find the most powerful statements are questions. If you can just have an upward inflection at the end of what you're saying,
Don't say anything.
and then just shut up.